I was 24, fresh out of grad school, and the youngest analyst at Arcadia Dynamics, a billion-dollar tech firm that bragged about redefining the future. What they didn't brag about was how they treated people who didn't fit the image. I was hired quietly, placed in a back cubicle near the server room. No welcome tour, no mentor. Just a badge and a seat. Most people didn't look at me twice, especially not Mr. Calhoun, the CEO himself. Tall, tan, white teeth, gray suit. The kind of man who called interns kid and called women miss even if they had PhDs. But I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to learn. And maybe, just maybe, leave a footprint. The company had this new software suite called LUX Vault, set to launch globally in 2 months. They said it would revolutionize data privacy. But from what I'd been reading, something didn't feel right. Late nights became normal for me. I read internal codebases, contract drafts, investor pitch decks. I wasn't supposed to have access to half of it, but I knew where the loopholes were, in the system and in their assumptions. Then I found it. A buried clause in the LUX Vault terms, so cleverly written, it looked like standard legal language. But what it actually said, would ruin everything. I printed it out. Just 1 page. And I waited. 1 week later, during a company-wide meeting in the glass boardroom, Mr. Calhoun beamed proudly at his team. Everyone clapped. Executives toasted. Then he made a mistake. He asked if anyone, had questions before final approval. My hand went up. People turned. Calhoun chuckled. Yes. Sorry, what's your name again? I stood. My name's Amara West. I'm in data integrity. He nodded with fake interest. Go ahead. I stepped forward and held up the page. There's a clause in your user agreement that invalidates third-party opt-outs. In plain English, it means this software can, and will, harvest private user data, even if they decline. Silence. I dropped the paper on the table. Page 47, paragraph 9. The language is designed to mislead. Calhoun's smile didn't fade instantly. It vanished. The silence in that sleek boardroom was louder than any siren. You could hear the air conditioner humming. The eyes of 30 executives locked on me like I'd just detonated a bomb, and maybe, in a way, I had. Mr. Calhoun slowly picked up the paper like it might bite him. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he skimmed the paragraph, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. One of the lawyers, a polished man with slick back hair and a tie so tight it looked like it was choking him, leaned forward. That clause is standard industry language, he said carefully. I looked him straight in the eye. Not when it overrides explicit user consent in territories with stricter privacy laws. You launch this in Europe, and regulators will rip it apart. There were murmurs now. A few nervous glances. Someone coughed. Mr. Calhoun cleared his throat. Miss West, is it? This isn't the time or the place for a legal interpretation. With all due respect, sir, I replied, keeping my voice steady, if this launches as is, you'll have an international scandal by the end of the quarter. You'll be summoned to hearings. Investors will run. The room shifted. I could feel it, somewhere between shock and panic. Even people who didn't know my name before were now looking at me like I just flipped a switch they didn't even know existed. Calhoun tried to recover. Let's circle back on this after the meeting. Thank you for your input. But I didn't sit down. I have documentation, I said. Audit trails. Meeting notes. Draft revisions. All time-stamped. I'd be happy to forward them to the ethics committee. That's when the chief compliance officer stood up. A woman in her 50s, usually quiet and composed. She turned toward Mr. Calhoun and whispered something in his ear. His jaw tightened. Then, in the span of seconds, the entire direction of the meeting changed. He turned back to the table. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. People began standing, but their eyes never left me. I just stood there, holding my ground, while the man at the top of the food chain stormed out, his face pale, his confidence shattered. I didn't get 20 steps out of that boardroom before a voice called out behind me. Miss West. A moment, please. It was Diane Mercer, the chief compliance officer, the only executive who hadn't looked at me like I was an intern who took a wrong turn. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished floor as she approached. Walk with me, she said, not unkindly. We moved down a quiet hallway away from the glass and chrome, toward a smaller conference room I'd never even noticed before. The plaque on the door read, Internal Strategy, Restricted Access. Inside, it was dimmer. Fewer screens. No one else. Diane closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. I've been watching you, she said calmly. You don't say much. But you read everything. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure if this was a compliment or a warning. She continued. You're absolutely right about the clause. It was slipped in by outside counsel, under pressure. Mr. Calhoun approved it. Most of the board didn't even read it. I swallowed hard. Then they're gambling with international law. Diane nodded slowly. That's one way to put it. Another way, they thought no one would notice. They certainly didn't expect you to. There was a long pause. Then she leaned in slightly. Tell me, why now? Why'd you speak up in front of everyone? I looked her in the eye. Because if I sent another email, it would be buried. If I asked for a meeting, I'd be ignored. But standing up in public? You can't unhear that. You can't unsee that. She studied me for a moment. Then, to my surprise, she smiled, but it wasn't smug. It was almost relieved. Well, she said, standing, you just changed the trajectory of a billion-dollar launch. I stood too. I'm guessing that's not a compliment. No, she said, walking to the door. It's a warning. And with that, she left. I stood alone in that cold, silent room, realizing the storm had only just begun. The next morning, I arrived early, before the office buzzed to life. But something was off. My security badge didn't work on the elevator. I had to get escorted up by the receptionist. She smiled awkwardly, eyes darting away like I'd caught a virus. When I reached my desk, all my files were gone. No sticky notes. No folders. No computer. Just a blank monitor and a little card with 2 words typed neatly on it, CHR. The HR office was on the 21st floor, far above my usual realm. As I stepped out of the elevator, I saw them already waiting, Mark from legal, Rachel from HR, and a tall man I didn't recognize, probably corporate counsel. They ushered me into a sleek, cold conference room. There were no pleasantries. No water. No smiles. Rachel spoke first. Amara, we've conducted a review of your access to internal systems. It appears you accessed documents outside your clearance level. I found a document stored under an open path labeled Legal Drafts, Review, I said plainly. No password. No restrictions. That doesn't matter, Mark said. Intent is still a factor. Then the tall man chimed in, carefully, no one's accusing you of anything criminal. But this company values discretion. What you did yesterday has caused disruption. Disruption. The word echoed in my head like a threat dressed in a silk glove. Rachel leaned forward. We're placing you on immediate administrative leave, pending further internal review. For telling the truth? I asked. For violating internal protocols, she said. They slid a paper across the table. Confidentiality notice. Terms of suspension. A veiled threat wrapped in corporate language. I didn't sign it. Instead, I stood up. You can try to bury me. But I made copies. And one of them is already in the hands of a journalist I trust. They went still. No one blinked. The tall man's jaw flexed. Mark's eyes narrowed. I walked to the door, pausing just long enough to say, I wasn't looking to burn this place down. But if you're going to shove me out the door, don't be surprised when the flames follow you. Then I left. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure, they were scared. By that evening, I was officially locked out of every system. My company email was deactivated. My ID badge now read invalid at every scanner. I was, for all intents and purposes, erased. But I wasn't done. I sat at my small kitchen table, laptop open, phone beside me, heart pounding. The journalist's name was Kira Langston. She didn't work for any flashy cable network, she ran an investigative site called Zero Trace, known for exposing corporate overreach and legal gray zones in tech. I'd reached out to her a week earlier, just in case. Now I was sending her everything. The clause, the source code snippet, the redline versions of the contract, the metadata logs. All of it backed up, cross-verified, organized. I wasn't just some disgruntled employee. I had receipts. Within 24 hours, the headline broke, Whistleblower reveals hidden data trap in Arcadia Dynamics LUX vault, millions at risk. It spread like wildfire. Tech blogs picked it up. Twitter exploded. Privacy watchdog groups issued public statements. Regulators from Germany and the Netherlands announced immediate reviews. And just like that, Arcadia's world cracked open. By Monday, I was getting anonymous texts. Some were warning me to lay low. Others were supportive, even apologetic. A few were threats. And then, just before noon, a news clip hit the feed. There was Mr. Calhoun, standing stiffly behind a podium during an emergency press conference. He looked like a different man, his hair slightly disheveled, his voice shaky as he read from a statement. We take these allegations seriously, we are cooperating fully with investigators, and have placed multiple team members on administrative leave while we conduct an internal audit. That's when I saw it. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple. That confident, media-trained smile. Gone. I closed the video. They could try to spin it any way they wanted. But the truth was already out. People were reading. Watching. Asking questions. For the first time, the balance had shifted. And I, just a girl they never noticed, was the one who tipped the scale. 3 days after the story broke, my phone rang. Unknown number. US area code I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Miss West. A smooth, neutral voice asked. Yes. Who's this? This is Daniel Horn. I'm calling on behalf of the Federal Trade Commission. We'd like to speak with you regarding your disclosure about Arcadia Dynamics. I sat up straighter. I've already sent everything to the journalist. We've read it, he said calmly. We'd like to hear it from you directly. And we'd like to ensure your protection moving forward. Protection. That word hit differently. He continued, you're not in trouble. On the contrary, you may be eligible for whistleblower protections, and possibly compensation, depending on how this unfolds. I agreed to meet, and within 48 hours, I found myself in a government office, seated across from a panel of stern professionals. They didn't waste time with small talk. They listened. Asked pointed questions. Took notes. For once, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't being silenced. I was the person they needed. Afterward, one of them, a woman in her 40s, stayed behind while the others left. You're braver than most, she said. But this won't be easy. These companies have power. Lawyers. Media friends. You need to be ready. I nodded. I've been ready. I just needed someone to listen. She gave me a business card with nothing but her name and a direct number. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me. When I left that building, I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Clarity. I didn't expose Arcadia for revenge. I didn't do it for money or fame. I did it because if someone didn't speak up, millions of people would have had their data used without knowing. Their lives poked through. Sold off. Compromised. And now that it was all unraveling, the question wasn't whether Arcadia would fall. It was how hard. By the end of the week, Arcadia's stock had dropped 19%. 3 major European markets had suspended Lux Vault's pre-orders. Investors were pulling out. And a congressional subcommittee was demanding testimony from the executive board. But somehow, Mr. Calhoun still hadn't resigned. Instead, he went on a well-known business podcast. A controlled space. Friendly host. Soft lighting. He wore a navy suit and smiled like nothing had happened. "We're navigating a temporary misunderstanding," he said smoothly. A young employee misinterpreted legal language. "And while we appreciate her passion, there's no deliberate wrongdoing on our part." He called me a bright but inexperienced analyst. I paused the video. Then I replayed that part. Not to punish myself, just to remember. That smile. That polished lie. That instinct to minimize, redirect, deflect. He still thought he could win this. What he didn't know was that I'd been working with Kira, the journalist, on a follow-up. The next article dropped that night. Title, Exclusive, CEO knew about data exploit, emails reveal months of concealment. This time, it wasn't just about a loophole. It was proof, threaded emails, dated signatures, and internal memos showing Calhoun had seen the risks and approved them anyway. The article included direct quotes. "No regulator will look this deep. We've sanitized it enough. User choice is a myth. We control the toggle." The fallout was instant. By morning, his name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Arcadia's board went into emergency session. 3 senators called for a federal inquiry. 1 state AG opened a formal investigation. And then came the final blow, a leaked memo from inside Arcadia. Effective immediately, Jeremy Calhoun is stepping down as CEO of Arcadia Dynamics. The man who once laughed at my name in a meeting. Now just another disgraced headline. I stood in my living room, phone in hand, heart racing, not with fear this time, but with vindication. The morning after Calhoun's resignation, I was sitting at my window, drinking cheap coffee and scrolling through the chaos online. My name hadn't been released publicly, but people were putting the pieces together. Tweets. Threads. Blog posts. Some called me a hero. Some called me a traitor. And some wanted to hire me. By noon, my inbox was packed with messages from law firms, advocacy groups, and privacy startups. A few big names were in there too, Silicon Valley companies suddenly desperate to look like they valued ethics. One message stood out. Subject, "Let's build something better." It was from Kira, the journalist. "Amara, you don't know this yet, but your story just changed the rules. I've got offers to turn this into a docuseries, a podcast, a book deal, but none of that matters unless the core stays true. People need to know the real story. Your story. And I think we should tell it together." At the bottom, she added, "Also, check the attachment." I opened it. It was a simple PDF. Proposed budget, the West Project, an investigative unit. Independent. Data-focused. Female-led. And at the center of it, my name. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there for a moment, breathing. I had expected to lose everything, my job, my reputation, maybe even my career. But instead, I'd exposed a lie, and created something real. Later that day, Diane Mercer, the chief compliance officer who once warned me, called me from her personal number. "I thought you'd like to know," she said quietly, "your file at Arcadia has been cleared. No mark. No record of misconduct." I smiled. "Good. I don't plan on coming back." She chuckled softly. "Didn't think you would. But I'm proud of what you did. Most people wouldn't have dared." I thanked her. Because I knew she meant it. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "The truth they never wanted out." And below it, by Amara West, "Going public changes everything. Even if your name is only whispered at first, eventually, someone shouts it." That someone turned out to be a mid-tier exec from Arcadia who went on a late-night talk show and casually dropped, "The analyst was a young woman named Amara West." She was passionate, but clearly didn't understand the bigger picture. And just like that, my inbox turned into a war zone. Some messages were empowering, encouraging, grateful, hopeful. But others? Cruel. Dismissive. Vicious. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, sweetheart. You ruin people's jobs. Try getting hired anywhere else now. This is why companies don't trust interns." They didn't know me. But they thought they could define me. For a day or two, I stayed offline. No interviews. No tweets. I let the storm rage around me without reacting. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. They were still talking about me. Not the clause. Not the data breach. Not the illegal activity. Me. They were trying to shift the spotlight, to smear the whistleblower and distract from the crime. Classic strategy. But I'd studied this game. And I wasn't playing defense. With Kira's help, we launched a public data page, the Loophole files. It laid everything bare, every document, every revision, every shred of proof that Arcadia's leadership knew what they were doing. And at the top of the site, I wrote a short message: "This was never about me. This was about what they tried to hide from you." It went viral within hours. Suddenly, the conversation changed. Again. I wasn't just a whistleblower anymore. I was a name people looked to when they wanted truth. 2 months later, the world had moved on, mostly. Arcadia Dynamics had a new interim CEO, 5 board resignations, and multiple lawsuits pending in 3 countries. Lux Vault never launched. Their stock still hadn't recovered. And me? I stood on the stage of a packed university auditorium in D.C. Lights warm on my face, heart steady, palms open. The placard on the podium read, "Data Ethics Accountability Summit, featuring Amara West." I just finished giving the keynote speech. Not from a script. Just from memory. The applause felt surreal, not because I needed it, but because once, not long ago, no one would have cared what I had to say. They would have walked past me in a hallway, eyes glazed over, never expecting me to matter. But now, they listened. Not because I shouted. Because I knew. After the event, a student came up, young, nervous, black, clutching a notebook like it was armor. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. Speaking up. I looked her in the eye and smiled. "No. I only regret not doing it sooner." She nodded. "I want to be like you." I leaned in and whispered, "No. Be louder than me." Outside the auditorium, Kira was waiting by the steps. She had 2 coffees in hand and that familiar glint in her eyes. "They want to fund season 1, she said, grinning. 6 episodes. The Loophole Files, inside the fight to keep big tech honest. You in?" I didn't hesitate. Let's make it impossible to ignore. As we walked into the early evening, I thought about the beginning, that glass boardroom, that smile Calhoun wore like armor, and the moment it shattered. They had tried to erase me. Dismiss me. Silence me. But in trying to hide the truth, they gave me something more powerful than any promotion or paycheck. They gave me a voice. And I was just getting started.